Well, that sucked. And sure, you're not going to win them all. The winning streak had to come to an end at some point, but even for a loss, that one was ugly. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where for the first time in franchise history, the Seattle Kraken lose to the Florida Panthers, doing it 5-1. In a game that honestly kind of felt like it was straight out of last season. The Kraken just couldn't seem to get out of their own way at either end of the ice, and while counting stats wise, it went perfectly well for them. In fact, they significantly outshoot the Panthers with 36 shots of their own on goal and limit the Panthers' shots pretty well to just 28. But when the Panthers got those shots, they got them from pretty prime locations and oftentimes without any sort of defensive challenge, frequently leaving Grubauer out to dry completely, who had some big saves in the game, but at the end of the night, his stat line looks, well, not like something you'd want to write home about. And of course, to make matters worse, the special teams, well, looked like what we saw last year as well. The power play really didn't get that many chances, but they couldn't get anything going. And the penalty kill continues to struggle. And honestly, leaving it at that, saying just that they're struggling, is being pretty generous. Really, the only part of this game that didn't feel like something we would have seen last season is that when the Kraken get off to a sloppy start immediately in this game, with Larson turning over the puck in the defensive end behind the net, which immediately leads to a shot on goal 10 seconds in, point blank in front of the net with nobody marking the forward player who gets the shot off, Grubauer is able to come up with the save as it doesn't end up in the back of the net 10 seconds into the game. It's a pretty nice save from Grubauer that keeps the puck out, but he is able to bail the Kraken defense out here. But of course, the sloppy play from the Kraken doesn't end there, and really continues until pretty much the midway point of the first period, as the Panthers continue to get pretty good looks and grade A scoring chances that Grubauer has to continuously come up with big saves on. And not only that, the Kraken can't even get out of their own way, running into each other a couple of times as Larson and Burakovsky collide just a few games after Larson ended up taking Geeky out, which he's still recovering from. And then a few minutes later, Burakovsky and Alexiak run into each other in the neutral zone, which in and of itself ends up leading to a good scoring chance for the Panthers immediately afterwards. Again though, fortunately for the Kraken, and to be fair, unlike what probably would have happened last year where at this point they may already be down 1 or 2-0, they are able to escape this terrible start to the game without surrendering a goal, and at the halfway point of the period are able to really start to build some momentum with back-to-back great shifts from the fourth and then first lines, both of whom get very good scoring chances at the other end. But unfortunately, Spencer Knight in goal for the Panthers was able to respond with some pretty good saves of his own, which he continued throughout the rest of the night, having a very good night by the end of it. And then just as quickly as that great push by the Kraken showed up, it completely disappears, and they have a sloppy change and a terrible back check, which of course allows the Panthers to get a 4-on-2 opportunity. They make a nice passing play, which really should have led to a goal for Stahl, but instead he fumbles or flubs the shot and the puck ends up in the corner. But as the puck is headed to the corner, Stahl tries to veer off to the side, but Grubauer, who was drawn to the side trying to stop what he thought was going to be a shot on the first pass, is outside the net and Stahl and Grubauer collide, putting Grubauer on his back and not allowing him to get back into the crease for the follow-up shot, as of course the Panthers get to the puck first in the corner, get it right out in front to Verhaeghe, who has a completely empty net to shoot at, and he makes no mistake. With no defense around him and no one in net, he makes it 1-0 Panthers. Or does he make it 1-0 as the Kraken are going to challenge this for goaltender interference, as again, Grubauer was taken out by Stahl next to the net and had no chance whatsoever to get back to try to make the save on the Verhaeghe shot. But of course, they come back with the decision pretty quickly, and honestly, with how close of a call I think this was, maybe a little too quickly, that there's no goaltender interference and it's a good goal, which obviously was not very popular with the home crowd. Now, honestly, and I know this probably isn't going to be particularly popular, feel free to let me know down in the comment section, but I think the way the rule should be called, this was probably the right call. Grubauer, even though he is trying to make a save on what he thinks is going to be a shot when it draws him out of the goal, he is outside the crease when he gets hit by Stahl, who was also trying to make an effort to not hit him. Now, there really was no avoiding the contact between Stahl and Grubauer, with Stahl trying to dodge around the net right into where Grubauer was sliding out. So it's pretty solid contact that's made, and again, it prevents Grubauer from having any chance to make the follow-up save. But because it is out of the crease, technically by the rule, I think it was the right call that it's not goaltender interference. That having been said, Grubauer still does kind of have the end of one of his skates and his glove just inside the crease, and one of Stahl's feet is inside the crease. So it's still a pretty close call. And what really makes this frustrating is that we've seen things that were much farther away from goaltender interference be called, like goals getting called back for goaltender interference. For example, New Jersey had a goal called back for goaltender interference when the goalie was playing the puck behind the net. Basically, what it comes down to is the NHL just seems to have no idea whatsoever what goaltender interference is. Again, we've seen goals called back when the goaltender was behind the net, outside the crease on their own volition, where Grubauer was sliding out because he was trying to make a save. But then, recently, we've also seen no goaltender interference called, like what happened here, once on a play pretty much exactly the same, where I think it was New Jersey's goaltender behind the net that gets run into on almost exactly the same play where goaltender interference was called against them. There's no goaltender interference called on that one, and the opponent scored. And then more recently, we saw Hellebuck against the Stars get his head almost taken off, and he stayed down while he was completely inside the crease except for his head, and they called no goaltender interference when the Stars tie it late. So at this point, again, I don't think anybody has any idea what the NHL is calling goaltender interference. I mean, basically what it comes down to is that if you want to say there's gray area in the rule, which there is, the gray area at this point is bigger than the white or black area at either end of it. It pretty much seems like it's completely up to the random official and random night and situation what the call is going to be. And as far as the challenge is concerned, yeah, if by the rule, it may not have been a particularly good challenge for the Kraken to make, but with the way it's being called, you'd take the shot. So look, I'd love to have a good explanation for you on what goaltender interference is and why this wasn't called goaltender interference. But ultimately, while a still pretty new market in Seattle, even though, again, there was a lot of hockey fans already, but a relatively new market and a lot of fans trying to figure out how this game works are now completely confused as to why Grubauer was allowed to just be run over and then a goal scored. Well, unfortunately, while those fans all might be very confused, so are the guys behind the bench who this is their career to know the rules of the game and coach it accordingly. So ultimately, unless something changes and the NHL decides to actually make a rule about what goaltender interference is and make sure that their officials across the league know how to enforce that, then we're going to continue to have fans and coaches and players completely confused as to what the heck is going on and what they should be expecting game to game. And that is not a particularly good look for the NHL as a whole. And of course, to make matters even worse for the Kraken, getting back to this specific instance, because they lose the challenge here, they also get a 2-minute delay of game penalty, which means they're on the penalty kill. And the penalty kill, while it had a pretty good game against the Capitals, it has been, I mean, there isn't an adjective bad enough for how bad this penalty kill has been recently. And that just continues here. As a minute into it, it's now 2-0. Once again, Grubauer's pretty much left out to dry by the penalty killing unit, as Verhaeghe's able to just kind of skate around Larson, gets a pass, and Grubauer's able to make a very nice post-to-post save, getting his foot to it, but the rebound goes right back out the other side, and nobody can get a defensive stick on it, so Verhaeghe just kind of keeps following the puck, picks it up, and puts it into the net before Grubauer can get back to the other side again. So yeah, just like that, in the span of pretty much 30 seconds, Verhaeghe has 2 goals, and it's 2 him, 0 Kraken. Now at this point, the entire building, and I'm sure most Kraken fans watching at home, had already turned on the officials. But even aside from the far from ideal goaltender interference situation, which even if you disagree with me and think that was a bad call by the officials, it doesn't really matter all that much as far as the second goal is concerned, because that is just straight up a terrible penalty kill that lets that one happen. You can't really blame the officials for both of them, even if the fact that the non-overturned call does put the Kraken on the kill. Now, with that having been said, from this point on for really pretty much the entire rest of the game, if there was one unit out there on the ice that was competing with the Kraken penalty kill for being the worst performance in this entire game, it was the officiating crew, as the rest of this game is completely unexcusable. It was certainly one of the worst officiated games I've seen in a long time, and maybe even the worst one-sided officiating I've seen in any Kraken game ever. Let me know if there's a game you can think of from last season. It's certainly the worst one this year. And while there have been other poorly officiated games on both sides, in this one, it was pretty much all in Florida's favor. And it starts right after Florida takes the 2-0 lead, as the Kraken nearly respond, pushing right into the offensive zone, getting a rush chance as a pass is dropped to Schultz coming right down the slot, and he almost gets a shot off, but his shot is prevented by a blatant hook on his glove hand, which prevents him from getting that shot off, and it ends up just trickling into the corner. Still, no call whatsoever, and even Hedy Olczyk on the broadcast is screaming, "Hook? Where's the hook? Where's the hook?" No call whatsoever. A little bit later, Carson Soucy, down at that end of the ice, gets hit in the face by a stick or a fist or something. I think he took a cross check or something to the face and is looking around for a call as he's dabbing blood out from his nose. Still, no call whatsoever. Could have easily been a 4-minute double minor for a high stick or some sort of hit to the face, as again, it drew blood. But of course, none of the officials have any interest in even looking his way, so he's forced to just skate off to the bench and get it patched up. And then as we get into the second period, one early on and then one later on in the period, Burakovsky got tripped and held at least once or twice that seemed pretty obvious, and a couple more times that could easily have been called. Still, no calls whatsoever, though fortunately for the Kraken, with the 2-goal deficit, early on in the second, they are at least able to respond through all of that. It's of course the Beniers line, who were pretty much the one bright spot for the Kraken in this game. Down in the corner, Beniers either wins a puck battle or forces a turnover. Something happens down in the corner, and a puck ends up down along the boards where McCann picks it up, gets it out to Eberle. Eberle fires it off on net. The save is made by Knight, who again continued to have a spectacular night. But his one mistake all night happens here as he leaves the rebound out in front for McCann to get a stick on. McCann goes forehand to backhand and puts it in around Knight into the back of the net to bring the Kraken to within one. Also making sure to add the flourish of shoving the net emphatically off of the posts and to the back boards after the goal goes in. So sure, the Panthers did get off to that early 2-0 lead in the first, thanks to some shenanigans from the officials and then a terrible Kraken penalty kill. But now, early on in the second, the Kraken are able to pull to within one and are starting to gain some momentum. Plus, with there still being plenty of time left, and the Panthers already coming into this game down a skater, and then during the first, actually midway through the first, they lost another, and by the end of the game, they'd be down 3 skaters. The Kraken have plenty of time in this game to wear the Panthers down, get back into it, and come out with a win just like they did against the Capitals. However, while the Panthers may have ended this game 3 skaters down, they again had some help from 3 other guys out on the ice. Well, I guess there's 4 of them if you include the linesmen, but really the 2 guys with the orange bands. So of course, not long after this goal from McCann, the officials find some reason to give Florida a chance to respond. Now, there are some extracurriculars between Dunn and Verhaeghe away from the play, which leads to traded roughing calls, but somehow in the whole sequence of events, they also find some way to galaxy brain their way into giving Dunn an extra slashing call. So that sends Florida to the power play, and then of course, with the officials having done their part, the Kraken penalty kill steps up and does its part. And by steps up, I mean pretty much just gets out of the way and allows Florida to score again. Okay, I will admit that with this particular goal that the PK allows, there was a fair amount of just bad luck that played into it as well, as a shot from well outside by Ekblad. I think he was more looking for a tip in front of the net because it was definitely going to go wide otherwise. And Alexiak is doing a pretty good job of defensively marking Tkachuk, who's the guy in front of the net for the Panthers. Unfortunately, though, the puck ends up going off of Tkachuk's shin and into the back of the net past Grubauer. Really not much he can do. It's just a fortunate bounce for the Panthers, and it's now 3-1. Then, finally, not long after the ensuing faceoff, there's a foul committed by the Panthers so blatantly obvious that even these officials have no choice but to call it, as Beniers draws, again, one of the most blatantly obvious trips I've ever seen, and the Kraken get to the power play. Unfortunately, like we said in the beginning, neither special teams unit for the Kraken in this game was particularly noteworthy in a good way for sure. The power play gets 2 chances, I guess you could say, but nothing particularly dangerous. That's killed off, and while the Kraken do have one more press for a few minutes midway through the second, eventually the rest of the second period, with a couple more missed calls by the officials on Kraken players, does end up still finishing with the score 3-1 in the Panthers' favor. And then as we get into the third, honestly, the Kraken really just didn't come out with all that much energy, I felt like, in this third period. It's pretty back and forth to start, and while, again, with the Panthers being 3 guys down, you'd think that they should be able to press and wear down a short bench, but they're just really never able to do much of anything with that man advantage as far as numbers are concerned. But again, speaking of numbers in the Panthers' favor, the refs were right back at it again here in the third, as the Panthers, on one of their rushes into the offensive end, Tkachuk just rips the stick out of Dunn's hands, But of course, none of the officials saw it or just decided to ignore it if they did. So Dunn, skating down the ice with his hands out while trying to defend, is left with no choice but try to just play soccer with the puck. Fortunately, that doesn't lead to a goal because Grubauer continued to play pretty well up to this point, but eventually more bad luck strikes as Grubauer makes another pretty nice save on a crossing pass and a good shot from basically point blank. But while he did originally make the save, the puck ends up between his legs. He has no idea where it is, and as he brings his legs together to try to figure out where the puck is, with the puck having been between his legs, he ends up accidentally kicking it into the net to give the Panthers the 4-1 lead. And at this point, after this fourth goal goes in, if you thought the Kraken didn't really have much energy at the start of the third before it, they certainly looked pretty deflated afterwards and really don't even make that much of an effort, it seems like, for the rest of this game outside of one more press from the Beniers line where Beniers gets absolutely robbed by Spencer Knight, again making some pretty big saves of his own at the other end. And eventually, I think the Kraken also a bit deflated and frustrated by the fact that they can't even get a single call to go their way. It's the Panthers who actually end up getting the next call as Larson heads to the box for the second time in the game. Really rough night for Larson, all things considered. Maybe one of his worst games for the Kraken, and he's been pretty good defensively. In fact, maybe the best Kraken defensive to this point in the season, but tough night for him. Either way, it's a fourth power play for the Panthers, and for a third time, they make it count. This time it's Forsling from a shot well outside that Grubauer sees coming all the way, so even with it being a really nice shot into the top corner, it's one that Grubauer probably should have. There's no screen in front of him, and it comes from a good distance. Still, it finds the top corner, and just like that, it's 5-1. The Kraken do end up getting one power play towards the end of the game. I guess the officials trying to make it look a little bit less lopsided from an officiating standpoint, but again, it's already 5-1 in the final minutes of a game, so it's not like it really matters. And the power play doesn't try all that hard to score, so we do end the game there. In the end, though, with this game, well, again, I've seen beer league games officiated better by a single official than what these four guys were able to do in this one. Completely unacceptable and one-sided in Florida's favor, and that may have contributed to one or two goals in their favor. It still was far from the only reason that the Kraken lost this game. Again, the penalty kill continues to be the worst penalty kill in the entire NHL over this last few game stretch. Over the whole season, I think they're still tied for second to last with only Anaheim directly below them, and the Ducks are making a good case for the first overall pick at this point in the season, so that says enough, I think, by itself. But even on top of that, the Kraken defense, again, was, I mean, it looked like last season. Sure, they didn't allow a ton of shots on goal, and they had their moments of playing decently, but when they did allow shots and chances, they were very good chances. And if you don't want to take my word for it, just look at the shot chart from this game. Now, the bigger the circle here, with, again, those gold circles being the Florida shots, the bigger the circle, the better the chance on goal. And you can see where a lot of those shots are coming from. Right up in and around the goal, pretty much constant just point blank shots off on Grubauer as he was getting teed off on all night and made a number of highlight reel saves. Unfortunately, it just isn't quite enough, and his stats end up suffering for it. So, of course, people are going to blame Grubauer for letting the Kraken down by looking at his stat line, but that's really just not the story of the game in this one. Now, with that said, it also wasn't a complete night necessarily from Grubauer, as the third period certainly wasn't his best. But again, he kept the Kraken in it up until that point, especially considering what he faced in the first and second period. So, as far as blame is concerned, he would not be anywhere near the top of my list. As far as 3 stars for this game for the Kraken, to end on a bit of a high note, again, it's pretty much just the Beniers line. So McCann, Beniers, and Eberle. McCann can have the first star because he got the goal. Beniers was all over the ice again, so he can have second star, and Eberle will get the third. Unfortunately, this game does bring an end to Beniers' point streak that was at 6 games, and also Burakovsky's point streak that was at 5 games, both of them getting close to tying the franchise record, which is 7, set by Eberle last season. Even with that having been said, though, it wasn't necessarily a fantastic night, all things considered, for those guys. They did overall make a positive impact, but this was pretty much a complete team loss for the Kraken. And now, with 2 days off, they have some things to practice, certainly defensively, if they want to be able to continue what they've done at the early part of this season throughout the rest of the year and get into the playoffs. And even more so with the penalty kill, which at this point, they might as well just completely scrap and start completely from new. I don't know if it's personnel, planning or execution, what's going on with it, but the penalty kill is just getting constantly walked over regardless of who their opponent seems to be. I guess at least as a glimmer of hope for the penalty kill that they can rebound from how things have been going is that they did have that stretch of 18 kills in a row from early on in the season that they can look back on and figure out what they were doing right there that they haven't been doing now. If I could pick one thing, it's probably just that they're letting the opponent enter the offensive zone way too easily and not making it a challenge to get across that blue line with a puck like they were doing during that streak. Again, though, to try to end this video on a bit of a higher note, as we do look forward to that game on Tuesday against the Canadiens, it is also likely going to be the return of Shane Wright coming back from his 2-week stint with the AHL, the Firebirds, where he did just finish off that last game, a 3-on-2 shootout victory for the Firebirds, with the shootout goal winner for them. And on top of that, started it with those 4 goals in 3 games, so he ends up finishing it 5 games in Coachella Valley with 4 goals, no assists for 4 points, and also the shootout winner. So especially considering he was fitting into a new team, a pretty good outing for him there, and we'll have to see against a team that he has some motivation against in Montreal, I guess 1 if he gets in the lineup, but what he's able to do now with having that experience against pros and having his first pro goals already scored. I mean, he's still looking for his first one at the NHL level, and that would be fun to see at home. And then after that, likely ends up going to the World Juniors as that report happens, I want to say on the 6th of December. So he'd probably only play the 1 game for the Kraken, and with Geeky still out, it would make sense that he would fit into the lineup for that game on Tuesday. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section about this game. Again, not a lot of great things to be said about it, either officiating or how the Kraken played. Until next time, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below. Help support the channel, so I'd appreciate you using them. And until that game against Montreal and hopefully seeing Shane Wright back, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.